No one remembers which song Elvis Presley was supposed to sing next. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because something happened that night that music itself could never compete with. More than 10,000 people packed the Las Vegas arena, expecting another unforgettable performance from the king of rock and roll. Instead, they watched the greatest star in the world stop a sold-out concert in complete silence. Walk away from the microphone. Ignore the orchestra. Ignore the cameras. Ignore every screaming fan, only to kneel before a frail, white-haired woman no one recognized. The audience laughed at first. Some thought it was part of the show. Others assumed Elvis had invited another lucky fan onto the stage. No one realized they were about to witness a promise that had waited more than 20 years to be fulfilled. Then Elvis gently held the woman's trembling hand. He leaned close enough that only she could hear him. His voice was barely a whisper.
"I never forgot you. Ever."
The old woman's entire body froze. Her lips trembled. Tears flooded her eyes before she could speak a single word. Within moments, thousands of strangers who had no idea who she was would find themselves crying with her. Because sometimes the most powerful love story is not about romance. Sometimes it is about gratitude. And that night, the entire world was about to learn why the biggest star on earth believed he owed everything to one forgotten woman. Las Vegas, 1973. The city never truly slept. Its streets glowed beneath endless rivers of neon light, while thousands of visitors poured into the International Hotel from every corner of America. Taxi doors slammed, camera flashes lit the sidewalks. Street musicians played Elvis songs outside the entrance, hoping tourists might leave a few dollars in their guitar cases. Inside the hotel, excitement spread like electricity. Every seat inside the enormous showroom had been sold weeks before. People had crossed states, some had crossed oceans. Many believed seeing Elvis Presley perform even once was a dream worth saving years to afford. Couples held hands. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Elderly fans carefully carried worn photographs that had faded with time. Young soldiers on leave proudly wore their uniforms. Women adjusted their sparkling dresses in tiny pocket mirrors. Everyone was smiling. Everyone expected music. Nobody expected history. Backstage, the atmosphere was strangely calm. Musicians quietly tuned their instruments. Stagehands checked every spotlight one last time. The conductor stood motionless with his baton resting against his shoulder. Security guards watched every entrance. No mistakes were allowed. When Elvis performed, perfection was expected. Then the arena lights disappeared. A wave of anticipation swept across the audience. Darkness covered every seat.
One brilliant spotlight illuminated the center of the stage.
The roar that followed shook the building. "Elvis! Elvis! Elvis!" The chant rolled through the arena like thunder, echoing across mountains. Then he appeared. Wearing his iconic white jumpsuit embroidered with shimmering gold, a jeweled eagle stretched proudly across his chest. His cape floated behind him as he walked with the quiet confidence of a man who had already become a legend during his own lifetime. He smiled. The audience exploded. Some fans screamed until their voices disappeared. Others burst into tears before he had spoken a single word. Elvis simply lifted one hand. Almost instantly, the arena became silent. That was the power he carried. He never demanded attention. He earned it. "Good evening," His warm Mississippi voice wrapped itself around every corner of the room. The orchestra answered with the opening notes of the first song. Strings rose gently. The piano followed. Then the drums. Finally,
Elvis began to sing. His voice was deeper than the records, warmer than anyone remembered. Every lyric felt personal, as though he were singing to each listener individually. Minutes passed in pure magic. One standing ovation became another. Every performance seemed even stronger than the last. The audience laughed, they cried, they sang every word with him. For nearly an hour, nothing felt unusual. Until everything changed. The orchestra prepared the opening notes for another ballad. Elvis stepped toward the microphone. He took a slow breath, raised the microphone, opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes had stopped moving. They weren't looking at the audience anymore. They weren't looking at the cameras. They weren't looking at the orchestra. They were fixed on someone sitting quietly in the very front row, an elderly woman, snow-white hair, a simple pale blue dress that had clearly been carefully ironed for this special evening. A tiny silver cross rested against her chest. Her hands trembled with age. She made no effort to wave. She didn't shout his name. She wasn't asking for attention. She simply looked at him. And in her tired eyes lived a sadness so familiar that it stole the breath from his lungs. The smile disappeared from Elvis's face. His heartbeat quickened. For a moment, the lights of Las Vegas faded away. The roaring crowd vanished. The orchestra disappeared. Instead, he smelled fresh bread. He heard rain striking old cafe windows. He felt the cold emptiness of an empty stomach. A forgotten memory, locked away for more than 2 decades, returned with terrifying clarity. His fingers loosened around the microphone. It slipped slightly in his hand. The conductor lowered his baton. Every musician stopped playing. The audience exchanged nervous glances. What's happening? Is Elvis all right? Did something go wrong? No one had ever seen him like this. Not on television, not on stage, not anywhere. Without speaking, Elvis slowly placed the microphone on the stand. He stepped away from the spotlight. One step, then another. Security instinctively moved forward. He quietly signaled them to stay back. This was something he had to do alone. The cameras followed every movement. Thousands of eyes watched in complete silence. He descended the small staircase leading into the audience. Fans reached toward him, desperate to touch his hand. He noticed none of them. His entire world had narrowed to one person, the old woman. She looked at him exactly as she had all those years ago, not as a legend, not as the king, but as someone she had once believed in, when no one else did. Elvis stopped directly in front of her. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Some reunions are too heavy for words. He slowly reached forward. His hands shook. So did hers. He gently wrapped both of his hands around her fragile fingers. The woman closed her eyes, almost as though she already knew what he was about to say. Elvis leaned close. His voice was barely audible. "I never forgot you. Ever." The old woman's shoulders began to tremble. A single tear escaped, then another. Within seconds she was crying so deeply that she could no longer hide it. The arena remained completely silent. No music, no applause, no whispers,
only the sound of one elderly woman weeping, and one man silently carrying the weight of a promise he had spent more than 20 years trying to keep. No one in that arena understood who she was. No one knew why the greatest entertainer alive suddenly looked less like a superstar and more like a grateful young man who had finally found the person he had been searching for half his life. But everyone felt the same question burning inside them. Who was she? And what had she done to make Elvis Presley stop the biggest concert of the year? The answer would change the meaning of that night forever.
The arena remained so quiet that the soft hum of the stage lights suddenly seemed loud. More than 10,000 people sat frozen. No applause, no whispers, no music. Only one question echoed through every mind. Who was this woman? Elvis still held her fragile hands, as though he were afraid that if he let go, she would disappear again. The elderly woman looked at him with tear-filled eyes. She searched his face carefully, not for the famous smile, not for the superstar millions adored. She was searching for the skinny, frightened young man she had once met long before the world knew his name. Slowly, a gentle smile appeared through her tears. "You remembered." Her voice was barely audible. It wasn't a question. It was disbelief. Elvis swallowed hard. His own eyes glistened beneath the bright stage lights. "I promised myself I never would forget." The audience leaned forward. Every camera in the arena focused on the two of them. No director had planned this. No television producer could have written it. This moment belonged only to truth. Elvis helped the woman stand. She moved carefully, her knees weakened by age. Without saying another word, he wrapped one arm around her shoulders and slowly walked her onto the stage. The orchestra remained perfectly still. Several musicians quietly wiped tears from their eyes without understanding why they were crying. Sometimes emotion arrives before explanation. When they reached the center of the stage, Elvis pulled another chair beside his own. He wanted her sitting next to him, not behind him, not hidden, beside him. Because in his heart, this stage belonged to her as much as it belonged to him. He looked across the enormous audience. Thousands of faces stared back, some smiling nervously, some already crying. Everyone waited. Elvis took a long breath. For a rare moment, the king of rock and roll seemed unable to find his voice. When he finally spoke, it was softer than anyone had ever heard. "Tonight," he paused. "I'm not here to sing first." Another silence. "I'm here to repay a debt." A ripple moved through the crowd. People exchanged confused glances. A debt? Elvis Presley? One of the richest and most successful entertainers in the world? What debt could possibly remain unpaid? He lowered his eyes toward the elderly woman. "For more than 20 years, I searched for her." A wave of surprise swept across the audience. "I searched through cities. I asked old friends. I visited places where no one even remembered my name anymore. I always arrived too late." His voice cracked. "I thought I had lost her forever." The elderly woman quietly reached over and squeezed his hand, exactly as she had done decades earlier. That tiny gesture unlocked a flood of memories. The world around Elvis disappeared. The bright lights of Las Vegas faded into darkness.
The applause, the cameras, the orchestra, everything dissolved. In their place came another night.
Another city. Another version of himself. A boy the world had never heard of. His clothes were worn thin. His shoes had small holes near the soles. Rainwater seeped through them with every step. His stomach had been empty for nearly 2 days. The little money he had earned from odd jobs had already been spent helping his parents keep food on the table. He never regretted helping them. But hunger has a way of making every step feel heavier. Cold rain fell across the streets. The wind pushed against him as if trying to knock him backward. Store windows glowed with warm light. Families laughed inside restaurants. The smell of fresh bread drifted into the street. Each breath made the hunger even worse. He looked into one cafe window. People were finishing hot meals. Steam rose from bowls of soup. Coffee cups rested beside slices of pie. He looked away. There was no reason to torture himself. He reached into his pocket one more time. Nothing. Not enough for even the cheapest meal. He smiled to himself. A tired smile. Maybe tomorrow. He whispered the words, as though saying them often had somehow made them easier to believe. He turned to leave. Then, a voice stopped him. "Young man." He looked back. Standing behind the cafe counter was a woman with kind eyes and gentle wrinkles already beginning to appear around her smile. She wore a simple white apron. Nothing about her suggested wealth. Nothing about her suggested importance. Yet there was something extraordinary about the way she looked at people. Not judging, not pitying, simply seeing them. "I think you're hungry." Elvis quickly shook his head. "No, ma'am." His stomach answered for him. A loud growl echoed through the quiet cafe. A few customers chuckled. Embarrassment rushed across his face. "I'm sorry." He stepped backward toward the door. "I can't pay." The woman never laughed. Instead, she disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, she returned carrying a plate of warm meatloaf, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and a bowl of soup still releasing gentle clouds of steam. The aroma filled the tiny cafe. She placed the meal in front of him. "Sit." Elvis stared at the food, then back at her. "I told you." "I don't have enough money." She smiled. "I know." The boy remained standing. He had been raised never to accept charity. His father had taught him that dignity mattered even when life became difficult. "If I eat this..." "I'll owe you." The woman laughed softly. "No." "You'll owe kindness." Those words puzzled him. She gently pushed the plate closer. "Eat while it's warm." For several long seconds, Elvis couldn't move. Not because he didn't want the food, because no stranger had ever looked at him with such quiet compassion. Finally, he sat. He whispered a prayer. Then he took the first bite. It tasted better than any meal he could remember. Not because it was expensive, because hope was mixed into every bite. The woman returned to the register without asking his name, without asking where he came from, without making him feel small. She simply trusted that one hungry young man deserved a warm meal. When Elvis finished eating, he walked back to the counter. "I'll come back. I'll pay you." The woman slowly shook her head. "I don't want your money." His brow furrowed. "Then what do you want?" She looked at him for a long moment,
long enough that he never forgot her expression. Then she said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "I've watched people my whole life. I know determination when I see it." She pointed gently toward the old guitar case resting beside the door. "One day, people will stand in line just to hear you sing." Elvis almost laughed. No one stood in line for him. Some nights, hardly anyone listened. "I don't think so." She smiled even wider. "I do." Then her expression became serious.
"When that day comes, promise me one thing." He nodded. "Anything." She extended her hand. "Never forget what hunger feels like. Never forget the people who helped you before the world knew your name. And whenever you find someone standing where you're standing today, be the hand that lifts them." Elvis looked at her hand, then took it. "I promise." She squeezed his hand only once. "I believe you." Years later, millions would believe in Elvis Presley. But she had believed first, long before the records, before the screaming fans, before the sold-out arenas, before the world called him the king. Back in the Las Vegas arena, Elvis slowly wiped a tear from his cheek. He looked toward the audience. "I kept my promise in every way I could. I helped strangers. I gave away money. I visited hospitals. I tried to repay that kindness." He looked back at the elderly woman. "But there was one promise I could never fulfill." His voice broke again. "I never found the woman who believed in me first." The audience was crying openly now. No one cared about the concert anymore. No one cared about the songs waiting to be sung. Because everyone sensed the story was still unfinished. And Elvis had not yet revealed the reason he had spent more than 2 decades searching for her. That truth was even more heartbreaking than anyone could imagine. No one moved. No one reached for the exits. The concert had become something far greater than entertainment. The arena was no longer filled with fans. It was filled with witnesses. Elvis stood in complete silence. The elderly woman remained beside him, gently holding his hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Neither of them had to. Some moments are too sacred for words. Finally, Elvis took a slow breath. His voice was almost unrecognizable. "When I became successful, I thought finding her would be easy." A faint smile crossed his face. "I was wrong." He looked toward the audience. "Every time I performed in a new city, I asked about her. I returned to that little cafe. It had closed. I spoke to the people who used to work nearby. Some remembered her. Others didn't. I hired people to search. I followed every lead, every address, every rumor. But every trail ended the same way." He lowered his eyes. "I was always too late." The audience listened without making a sound. There were nights after concerts when I sat alone in my hotel room wondering if she was still alive. I wondered if she ever knew that one warm meal had changed the course of my entire life. His voice cracked. I prayed that one day I would have the chance to tell her. He turned toward the woman. And tonight, God answered that prayer.
The elderly woman smiled through tears. "I never expected you to remember." Elvis gently shook his head. "Forget?" He smiled sadly. "How could I? You didn't just feed a hungry boy. You fed a dream." A wave of emotion swept across the arena. Several members of the orchestra quietly lowered their heads. Camera operators struggled to keep filming through blurred eyes. Even security guards stood motionless. For the first time that night, Elvis looked directly into the audience.
"There is something else you don't know." He slowly reached inside the pocket of his white jumpsuit. The crowd watched every movement. He removed a small, worn leather wallet. It looked decades old. Its edges were faded. The leather was cracked from years of use. He carefully opened it. Inside, folded many times over, was a tiny, yellowed receipt. He unfolded it with extraordinary care. The paper trembled in his hands. "I've carried this with me for more than 20 years." The giant screens magnified the fragile piece of paper. It was the cafe receipt from the day she had fed him. Across the bottom, written in fading blue ink, were simple handwritten words. "Paid in full, with kindness." A collective gasp echoed across the arena. The elderly woman's hands flew to her mouth. "I thought you threw that away," she whispered. Elvis slowly shook his head. "No. I carried it through every tour, every recording session, every movie, every award. Whenever success tempted me to believe I had built this life alone, I opened this wallet. I looked at those words, and I remembered who I really was." Tears streamed freely down the woman's face. The audience was crying openly now. Some embraced complete strangers. Others simply covered their faces. The arena had never felt so silent. Elvis carefully folded the receipt one last time. Then, to everyone's surprise, he placed it into the elderly woman's hands. "It belongs to you." She immediately shook her head. "No. It belongs to the boy who kept his promise." Elvis smiled. "That boy only exists because of you." The woman gently closed his fingers around the receipt again. "Then keep carrying it, so you'll never stop helping people." Elvis could no longer hold back his tears. For a moment, the king of rock and roll looked exactly like the hungry young man who had once stood in that little cafe with empty pockets and a frightened heart. Then he did something no one expected. He slowly stepped back. Then, he knelt before her. Not as a performer, not as a legend, not as the most famous man in the building, but as a grateful man honoring the person who had changed his life. The entire arena stood. No one waited for someone else to begin. More than 10,000 people rose to their feet together. The applause started softly. Then it grew louder and louder, until it became a thunderous roar that shook the walls of the arena. It continued for minute after minute. No music played. None was needed. The old woman gently placed both hands on Elvis's face, exactly as a mother might comfort her son. Her voice was soft. "My dear, I only gave one meal to a hungry young man." Elvis closed his eyes. "No. You gave hope to someone who was running out of it." She smiled. "And look what hope became." The arena erupted once more. The orchestra quietly began playing a gentle instrumental melody. This time, Elvis did not sing. Instead, he extended his hand. The elderly woman accepted it. Together, they shared one slow dance in the center of the stage. There was no choreography, no performance, no spectacle, only gratitude. Every step carried the weight of more than 2 decades. Every smile carried a lifetime of memories. When the music ended, Elvis kissed her gently on the forehead. The audience answered with another standing ovation. Many people later said it was the longest applause they had ever witnessed. Long after the concert ended, people walked into the warm Las Vegas night speaking quietly. No one argued about which song had been the best. No one talked about the lights or the costumes or the performance. They talked about kindness, about gratitude, about promises, and about one forgotten waitress who had unknowingly changed music history by refusing to let a hungry young man leave without a meal. Years later, many would remember Elvis Presley as one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. But those who were inside that arena on that unforgettable night remembered something even greater. They remembered the moment a legend proved that true greatness is not measured by fame or fortune or applause. It is measured by the people you refuse to forget after the world remembers your name.